So in our second panel, we're going to talk about China's economic outlook, and naturally we'll get into contemporary issues like U.S.-China trade conflict. I'm not going to start with that, but that'll come up along the way. Very fortunate to have another old friend, Liu Jung, who's the chief economist of the China Development Bank. And while in the first panel we talked a lot about their global role, their primary business is domestic economy, Chinese domestic economy, and we're going to be talking about economic reform and the outlook. Very fortunate to have Ling Chun, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins SAIS right here in Washington, and also an old friend of mine, Wang Yan. We worked together in the World Bank for a long time, and now she's the deputy director of the IFF Institute. So I'm going to start with Liu Jung, and we've had the 19th Party Congress and then the National People's Congress. And my question for you is, what are the priorities for China's economic reform? And what are the prospects that China will actually be able to implement economic reform this year and into next year?
好，这个刚才多大伟先生让我来回答了一下，就中共召开19大以后，中国未来的经济的走势。那么最近呢，我专门也跟有一些朋友一起参加了博鳌论坛，和我们在3月份召开了中国发展高层论坛。那么从这些里边呢，释放了一个很强烈的一个信号。第一个，中国改革开放40年，人均 GDP 就 GDP 的年均增长9.5%。贸易的年均增长14.5%，我们解决了7亿多人的脱贫问题，占到世界的70%。我也算了一下，按照我们最近世界银行的最近公布数据，那么中国 GDP 的总额13.17，美国的 GDP 去年的总额是39.36。19.36，这样的话呢，我们两国之间呢，大致中国的 GDP 相当于美国的将近2/3，但是人均 GDP 这块，中国人均 GDP， 美国人均 GDP 相当于中国的将近7倍，所以在这个点讲呢，中国仍然是一个发展中的国家。那么，我想刚才大家包括刚才我们的政治界行长，也包括周燕礼主席也讲到，就是说中国的改革开放问题。因为我也当时在场，亲自聆听了习主席的对外开放的4大举措，后来我也去看了一下海南的发展，变成中国的一个最大的一个自由贸易区，逐步建立一个自由港，国际自由港。所以因此我觉得未来中国的5年发展，就按照19大讲的，我们到2020年第一个100年的时候，我们全面建成小康社会。那么我们目前面临的困难和问题，就是打好3大攻坚战，包括重大风险控制。第二个呢，关于这个环境保护。第3个呢，就是这个扶贫的事情。所以因此我觉得在未来的5年，我个人的一个分析，我会保持中国经济在6.0到6.5之间，我认为这是可以保证这个数字的。所以说，我们现在的未来的一个发展，就是要推进供给侧结构改革。简单点说，过去叫做有没有，今天要解决的事情叫好不好的一个说明。所以在这个方面，我觉得中国的路子 建立这套高质量发展的这个路径，我认为还面临很多的困难和问题，包括各位女士和先生们都看到，中国政府对今年两会对整个党和国家机构进行了一个大的调整，体现国家治理能力的现代化。所以，因此我觉得我还用这么一个话：未来前景光明，我们道路还有很多工作去做。我就简单的说。
Okay, thank you very much. You mentioned President Xi Jinping's speech in Boao. He discussed various reforms, including opening up more sectors of the economy. And then just in the last week, we've gotten more details from the planning agency about opening up automobiles, ships, aircraft, et cetera. So what I want to ask Ling Chan, I know you're doing research on and thinking about the China made in China 2025 industrial policy. And so on the outside, so we hear this talk about opening up the economy and being more market oriented, but then we have what seems like a very detailed industrial plan to build up Chinese capacity in 10 key sectors. I'm not going to list the 10 key sectors, but it includes electric vehicles, AI. So how do we square the circle? How do we understand the Made in China 2025?
Thanks, David. Yeah, I would like to talk a bit about it. So for more than a decade, China has been trying to achieve industrial upgrading and innovation, and which the current form is Made in China 2025, but that can be traced back actually a long time ago. And as David mentioned, it promotes sectors such as advanced IT and robotics, electric cars, and machineries, and probably a lot of us sitting here are already kind of familiar with. And to some extent, China has achieved success in second-level innovation. But in the long run, I think the challenge of climbing up the value chain is not to further push it from top in a top-down pattern, or actually allocating more resources to generate some sort of quantitative measure, such as the number of patent applications. But rather, the real challenge is to take local initiatives seriously and listen to what local officials and businesses say, and to create a business-friendly environment for entrepreneurs. Although I know that we're in DC, and this crowd is somewhat familiar with hearing the saying that Beijing does this and Beijing does that. We need to keep in mind that there is an important part of the story that happened in local China. And we should never forget that it is in local China that there are majority of new reform experiments that are carried out that succeeded. For example, Deng Xiaoping's market reforms, development zones, and recent rise of the e-commerce. They all kind of originate, first of all, from the local China. And so in this regard, I think Premier Li Keqiang's approach, often translated, I'm hoping I'm translating correctly here, mass entrepreneurship and innovation, is promising and should receive more attention. And which means that we're not only targeted at state-owned enterprises, but we're also paying attention to private entrepreneurs and private firms, which, to quote David in one of his papers, have contributed to the largest share of added value in exports. And these are a significant part of the entire Chinese economy as well. And another crucial aspect that I would like to highlight is, as David was asking me at the beginning, how to coordinate relations between foreign and domestic firms. With this pressure of liberalization and opening and of course, the current pressure of trade wars, it is increasingly hard to implement any industrial policies without making foreign firms feeling uncomfortable, right? So, and indeed, starting in 2016, we have seen that inward FDI in China has hit its new low, which decreased it at 0.2% in comparison to the average growth rates, roughly about 4% in previous decades. And that's also the year where the outward FDI actually surpass the inward FDI. But we also need to look at that in order to reverse this alarming trend. Central government in China have tried to remove some of the restrictions for FDI entrance, especially with the launch of free trading zones in Shanghai and in 10 other cities, and recent President Xi's speech at Boao last week, and with this launch of new zone in Hainan. We believe that there are some measures that are taking place that's trying to reverse this trend. Of course, there's still ongoing worry about unfair beneficial policies, but we have to ask whether indeed this initiative of technology learning upgrading is really just zero-sum. And to be honest, providing subsidies or tax incentives or trade protections, these are practices that are controversial at best. So maybe some other measures, such as establishing joint R&D centers, which we already start doing in a lot of localities across China. Apple is trying to set up joint R&D centers across different cities. These can be mutually beneficial efforts and also help to close the gap between research and production that are often found in a lot of global firms and also across local China. And finally, I would say that yes, industrial policies and implementing industrial policies in an open world is difficult, but it's not unseen among other countries as well, including some of the advanced industrialized countries such as Germany. We have Germany Industry 4.0, which probably catches less attention compared to Made in China 2025, but still it's one of the a big effort from Germany. So we should sort of cast in a more comparative perspective. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ling. There were a couple of really important points there. I like your emphasis on a lot of China's history of reform has been reform bubbling up from the local level. And China 2025 sounds like a central plan coming from Beijing, but to the extent it works, it's probably going to depend a lot more on local entrepreneurship. And then, as you say, pretty much every country follows industrial policy. And the question is, what are the instruments? Are they, the WTO consistent? Are they part of global norms? I think China can promote technological upgrading without violating WTO norms, other norms. So that's very helpful. It's a kind of natural lead into what I want to ask Guang Yan. I know she's looking at the Hong Kong, Macau, Guangdong Bay Area. So in one of the earlier comments, someone mentioned the Bay Area. And for Americans, we naturally think of San Francisco. But I guess the Bay Area now is Hong Kong, Macau, Guangdong. So you want...
Yes.
And that's a good example of this kind of local initiative that Ling emphasized. So tell us a little bit about this.
Thank you, David, for inviting me. I have been having the honor of working with the IFF for 5 years and working with Secretary General Zhang and Dr. Zhuang for 5 years. I'm writing this IFF China report for 3 years now. So I want to bring your attention to 2 points. One is macro, one is micro from the bottom up. So in the past year, I've been working with Justin Yifu Lin on a book on going beyond the aid, in which we talked about patient capital. So why does China have some advantage, comparative advantage in building Belt and Road Initiative? And one of the advantages is that countries in East Asia with Confucius tradition, they have this long-term orientation. The patient capital is rich in those regions. We define patient capital as those capital invested in a relationship. And the investors aim to have a win-win situation from the development of the countries receiving the investment. And patient capital is associated with institutional investors, including institutions such as the China Development Bank, Silk Road Fund, AIIB, and also some private equity. I was in Guangzhou last November, and there were so many private equity firms with a lot of savings and capital to be invested. So China is utilizing the comparative advantage in patient capital, meaning that those capital who are equity-like capital, and they are invested in the country with the view that in the long term that they can have a decent rate of return and a win-win situation in 5 to 10 years. So developing countries should utilize those patient capital in a good way, and multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, IMF, and all regional development banks should also try to keep patient capital patient, meaning long term. Okay, that's one theoretical point. Second point is about Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Bay Area. So as you know, all know about the economy of scale, agglomeration effect. So this Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Bay Area has the potential, huge potential to become the world-class cluster of cities that can combine financial centers, innovation centers, IT centers, as well as manufacturing sector. The total GDP size of the 9 cities in Guangzhou plus Hong Kong and Macau was 1.5 trillion US dollars, accounting to 11% of China's GDP. The total population was about 67 million, and the total land area was 56,000 square kilometers, bigger than New York, San Francisco, and the Tokyo Bay areas. The per capita GDP was quite low, was around 20,000 US dollars, with great potential to grow faster. So it is one of the largest financial centers in the world, and with high-tech centers, high-tech industries, as well as manufacturing hubs. The 11 cities located in Guangdong and Hong Kong, Macau, they are located at different locations in the smile curve. And so they have different comparative advantages, and they can complement each other very well. So they all have different comparative advantage in each city. For example, Guangdong has an R&D investment. The R&D intensity in Guangdong has reached 2.56% of GDP, exceeding the OECD average. But that R&D intensity is quite low in Hong Kong. It's 0.7%. So there is a lot of complementarity that can be utilized. The last point is that in view of the one country, two systems in mainland China and Hong Kong and Macau, and in view of the different financial regulations, I would like to propose that perhaps in the future there is a need to build a Bay Area Development Bank, which is a multilateral development bank invested by all three sides, and also attracting private equities, attracting private investment. So this bank could be a platform for PPP partnership. And lastly, I think the World Bank and IMF can try to better utilize this patient capital in equity-like investment, providing more equity-like development financing. for the sustainability goals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wang Yan. I take your point about China being very patient, and I thought it was interesting that Liu Jung referred to the next 100 years, the first 100 years of China's development, and thinking ahead to the next 100 years. So, welcome the Chinese long-term perspective. But now, Liu Jung, I want to ask you something much more immediate. When President Xi Jinping in his speech at Boao, he outlined some moves toward opening up the economy more. And other Chinese officials have talked about accelerating the openness. But right now we have this looming trade conflict between China and the U.S. U.S. has proposed tariffs on $50 billion of imports from China in response to what the U.S. considers problems with market access, too many markets that are closed in China, investment restrictions, forced technology transfers. So are these moves that President Xi has put out there, is that going to be sufficient to avert a trade war? Do we know whether the two sides are actually negotiating? And how do you see this trade conflict playing out?
OK， 这个问题只能是看着事态的发展。我呢，就关于中美的贸易问题呢，我也曾经做点研究。主要的这次呢，习总书记在博鳌论坛上降低门槛，降低关税，这个加强知识产权保护，包括增加进口，这个措施都应该是在中国目前发展的阶段所形成的。因为在这些年当中，中国的经济，我们靠出口拉动的这种占比，实际上这些年已经在下降。我们现在消费占我 GDP 的贡献都达到了58.8%，包括我们跟美国之间的这种贸易，实际上我们已经在我出口占比当中也在调整。所以因此我觉得这个中美之间的贸易问题，我认为这是一个长期的问题。我很注意到去年美国发布了国家安全报告，这个报告里边明确指出，由过去的全面反恐转为大国之间的竞争。所以我的一个观点，我也在一些 China Daily 也发表我的观点，中美之间未来将是竞争性的一个合作，贸易的这种摩擦还会不断的去产生。但是我个人认为，贸易的摩擦大家有个规矩，这就是谁呢？我的意思觉得要在 WTO 的规则下来解决这个事情。我刚刚看了一个消息，看美国方面也释放一个信号，根据301的调查关税跟中国进行磋商。所以我的一个想法呢，就是说我们之间坐下来谈，我认为会更好。我在这里面讲个小故事跟大家分享一下。我在今年的3月26号早餐会上，这个早餐会呢是由我们原来的咱美国的前防长科恩主持的，就关于中美贸易问题，我们也做了一些沟通。我个人的一种感觉，美国的贸易的逆差已经持续了好多年，不是今天才有。这里边就有一个，我一再讲，有一个结构问题。大家经常讲的，美国的储蓄率很低，消费很高。第二呢，美国占领了全球价值链的高端，那么低端一定是给了一些发展中国家。在全球分工过程中呢，也是美国呢也占了很多的这方面的东西。但是 我是一直觉得，在这个全球化当中呢，如何来使美国的袖带阶层能够得到一些好处，这是需要研究的。所以因此我觉得，中美之间和为贵，因为只有这样，我认为大家都好坐下来，心平气和的去谈一谈。OK。
Okay, so I tend to agree with you. I think the trade deficit, trade surplus situation, you use the word structural. I think of it more macro, but I think I kind of agree with the thrust. But I do feel that the U.S. has legitimate market access issues in China, and so I'm going to turn to Ling. I'm going to link this to what you were talking about. So, because this China 2025, it's part of the tension between the U.S. and China. The administration is specifically saying, they're worried about China subsidizing the development of these industries. So the question I want to ask you is, in thinking about upgrading industries, you can do more fundamental things like build up venture capital, as Yen mentioned, or develop excellence in science and technology, which China's turning out a lot of engineers and scientists, and research-based funding, basic research. So there are a lot of general things you can do that nobody's going to object to. But then there's the more specific, subsidizing particular industries through protection. That's clearly violating global trade rules or norms, and or through credit subsidies. Less clear if that's a WTO violation, but I would say that's, for the big economies, subsidizing the development of specific industries is kind of outside the norm. So how would you characterize the Chinese industrial policy in terms of dealing with fundamental things versus the very specific subsidization? And what I'm trying to get at is there a chance for China to pursue 2025 in a way that the United States and other countries could feel comfortable with?
Thanks, David. This is a truly important question, but it's also a very hard question. So that's why I personally think that there's more promising direction to go, which is, as I mentioned, setting up joint R&D centers, or in general encouraging science and technology development and innovation, and nurturing a broader institutional environment that are conducive to better research production and linking, most importantly, actually, to link research with the production, because right now some of the major challenges that we actually have, we have a lot of excellent talent in China that are even by work standard of first class, but how to connect all these talent in research with production is some of the major challenges that China has been undergoing for quite some time. Now, with subsidies, yes, it is tricky for the current globalized environment, but not, as you also briefly mentioned, that not all subsidies against the WTO rule, only when they threatens certain industry, the operation of industries of foreign countries, and that in a fundamental way in China, that it actually is considered as fundamentally against the WTO rule. So in this regard, I do not think that any subsidies would be doing that. It may create some sort of worries or discomfort among foreign firms in China, but yeah, this is not a question I would be able to address immediately here. But I would say that, again, because as a scholar and researcher that not only focus on current period of China, but just overall in general political economy, I would say that that's not something that's as unusual as people sometimes may think. All kinds of advanced countries have done it in certain degrees. at certain period. Well, some countries have done in the many centuries ago, not the current century, right? So that we probably have more of a comparative perspective and historical perspective. It is true, though, that the current space that developing countries can manipulate is relatively small. It's drastically shrinking with intense increased tension among in this liberalized world.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the audience in just a moment, so I warn my staff, and you can form your questions. But I want to ask Yan, I want to try to make a link around some of these topics. So what you're describing, in the Hong Kong, Macau, Guangdong area, could you say something about the role of foreign firms? Because there is, as Ling was suggesting, foreign firms in China are a little bit nervous these days that they're being left out. I mean, a lot of these fundamental issues between the U.S. and China come down to what we call national treatment. So the principle in the OECD countries is once someone's invested in your economy, they're treated the same as other firms. Foreign firms in China, often feel that they're subject to a different regime, and they're worried that they're going to be excluded from these various programs and developments.
Yes. In the Boao Forum, the presidency and governor of central bank, Dr. Yi Gang, have given a timetable of further opening up, and China is not going to focus on export only, and it's going to focus on more imports. And Yi Gang talked about opening financial institutions to foreign investors, and the shareholding has increased. So there are policies in place that will further opening China trade and financial investment up. Foreign firms should be able to be traded as the national firms. And in Hong Kong, in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Bay Area, it's an experimental area with further opening up measures. And even Hainan is going to be built into an open port, so port city. And it's similar to maybe in the future, maybe similar to Hong Kong. And so from foreign corporations, they can, of course, invest and headquarter in Hong Kong, in Macau, and access the Guangdong market very easily. So I was there in Guangzhou and in Nansha, and we have a delegation here from Guangzhou and Nansha, and they can say more about the further opening up of the Guangdong area, the Bay Area.
Okay, thank you. So turn to the audience. Where are the microphones? Thank you.
Yeah, Bill Jones, Executive Intelligence Review. My question to Mr. Liu is, you mentioned that one of the three major problems, of course, the first one is the financial risk that China is looking at. Now, people generally think about this as financial risk in Chinese investment, bubbles in the housing industry, or possible misinvestment in the BRI. But it seems to me that this also is a concern of a possibility of international financial risk. That is, there is, from many economists, a concern that there will be another 2008. Because although the Chinese financial system has its problem, it's relatively well regulated compared to the international financial system, which has all kinds of bubbles around, which have never been resolved after the 2008 crisis. And I was wondering if you could just say something about the concern that may be existing, given this #1 status for the financial risk with regard to the international financial system, and looking down the road where China is going to become a major player internationally, they will have a responsibility not only for the Chinese financial structure, but also will have a say in this issue of global governance on how the international financial system should work, so that it isn't as dysfunctional as it has been. And I'd just like to mention on the 2025, I don't know why everybody isn't totally upset about the fact that the United States is saying, you can't develop this, you can't go to 5G, we are the top dogs in this class, China's not going to do it. This is really, why don't they say, hey, we're doing something wrong, why don't we get on the stick and start developing our industries more quickly? But trying to penalize China for developing an economy, a technology that's going to be a benefit of all mankind seems to me like absolutely the wrong policy.
刚才你提到一个关于中国的房地产的问题。首先呢，中国的目前房地产有没有泡沫？会不会像2008年美国次贷危机一样？那我想，我个人的分析认为，不会出现这个问题，因为当时2008年就10年前，美国次贷危机是因为金融产品不断的几何的速度进行泡沫，一旦挤开了以后，对整个美国体系产生重大的影响，因此就出现次贷危机，全球的人跟着吃药。同样，对中国来讲，我们现在中国每年对世界经济的贡献度超过了30%，也就是说，中国经济的下降也会影响世界。那么就房地产这个情况而言，我开发银行有一个住宅事业部，专门提供保障性安居工程。我们在提供的过程中，一部分是实物量，一部分是货币化分房，既解决了民生的除棚进楼的问题，同时也拉动了经济的发展。我们目前在国内，在房地产市场上，我认为泡沫的问题不是大的问题。现在防范重大风险，主要的是集中在金融方面的一个风险，目前还是比较大一点的风险。OK.
Okay. This gentleman over here.
Barry Wood, RTHK in Hong Kong. I'd like to ask about the Greater Bay Area and some specific ideas you have. When you mention a development bank, what kinds of projects? I mean, there's so much integration that's already taking place. Are you thinking, for example, in terms of some combination of the Hong Kong and Shenzhen stock exchanges? And as a subsidiary, trivial matter perhaps, is the term Pearl River Delta dead in favor of Greater Bay Area?
That's a difficult question. I think the Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau Bay Area development plan is included in the 5 years plan, also included in the documents of the National Congress. And as to the specific investment projects, I am not that familiar with. But one of the focus is to increase the labor and personnel mobility between Hong Kong and Shenzhen and Zhuhai and all these areas. And also there is there are some initiatives of building financial institutions that attract all three sides, such as private equity or investment funds, including investors from all three sides. But there is a difficulty because of the regulations, capital control regimes are different. So that's why I propose that you need to have an investment bank or development bank for the Bay Area, and with all three sides invested as shareholders, and you can attract more private equity funds from all three regions.
Would that make it easier to do projects that cut across jurisdictions?
Yes, yes. That's my
That's your
intuition. That's my hope.
Okay, this gentleman here.
Hi, Chen Weihua, China Daily. Yeah, I have a question about industrial policy. You know, basically, what is a proper, a legitimate industrial policy? I mean, if you look at Japan, South Korea, I mean, when their economy took off, I mean, they have very strong industrial policy. I would think Germany have industrial policy, and the U.S., if you think Obama subsidized the green energy, I mean, even Trump's America First, Buy America, High America, I think it's industrial policy. So some people in China say America had issue with this because China has been too successful in the past decades, so they are kind of jealous, I don't know. But, you know, China is a developing country. If you go to World Bank, you know, just check the stat number. I mean, it's ranked 80s. I mean, per capita GDP is not a question. I mean, so I would like to China become a developed country, actually. I mean, that's not true today. But so what's its legitimate industrial policy in your mind? I'm actually very much like David to participate too. I mean, thank you.
Right, so I'm going to throw that one to Ling first, and then I may have a comment.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so for industrial policies, as I mentioned, it's not just a current situation, it's also a historical situation. And this gentleman there correctly mentioned that there are a lot of countries down there, Japan, South Korea, the Taiwan region of China, and I mean a lot of other advanced countries, France, Germany, and United States itself, just in different centuries. And there's a book by Ha-Jung Chen, I'm sure some of you have read, it's called Kicking Away the Ladders, which basically means that, you know, once we get on top, once we get to the position of occupying the top of the global production chain, then we probably can just kick away the ladders, so not allowing other countries to do that. It does sound like that, but there are also deeper reasons. That is, when Japan, South Korea, and other East Asian countries are doing that ahead of China, that was during the Cold War, where United States actually have an interest to promote these countries through a large amount of aid, because United States seeing these countries as a fundamental of fundamental importance to be allies in order to at that time in order to keep balance with Soviet Union. So there is a Cold War kind of background that allow these countries actually to implement, carry out industrial policy without too much criticism from the United States. Whereas right now, we're in a totally different era. We are in a world where China has entered the WTO, and there's a much more liberal rules that are playing around in the world. So that's the reason that we've seen this different. But we shouldn't see it as too pessimistic. Like, we should have more optimistic view as well. I mean, maybe this is something good. This maybe that says that people care about G2, right? We talk about G2 nowadays, which is United States and China. That's maybe something good in indicating that, you know, China is catching attention and is a rising power. Yeah.
Right. So I would add there are lots of things China can do that are kind of clearly acceptable. Developing the venture capital business. China actually doesn't put that much money into basic research. You know, Yen mentioned the very high Guangdong province with almost 3% of GDP in research, but China underinvests in basic research. But on the other hand, it's done a great job building up the science and technology universities. So there are a lot of general things. I think that in this kind of U.S.-China tension, the part where I sympathize with the U.S. is I do think we now have a global norm of relatively open investment for direct investment. And so it's when China closes certain industries and says the foreigners can't have controlling power of an enterprise, and they're basically using kind of China's market power to build up Chinese firms, that is not really acceptable in the global system. And the world has changed, so you can say it's unfair. South Korea did some of these things 20 years ago, but hey, the world's changed. And so I think that, I think there's just some specific aspects of the Chinese industrial policy that are not acceptable, and hopefully the two sides or the multi-sides, can negotiate us a way out of real trade conflict on this. Okay, other questions? Our Afghanistan friend. I don't normally call on the same person twice, but sorry, she caught my attention.
Thank you so much. Marina Fazal, African-American journalist again. You knew I couldn't resist this comment. Well, you mentioned the Cold War, and you've just, again, pointed to ways that there are more intricacies involved. Doesn't it, I would like you to put into context the era that we are living in right now, with the Afghan war carrying on and still being the longest of this country's, with us being able to reference a Cold War that perhaps is on the brink of being launched on its second round, or at least there are those commenting in such ways. Is it really a viable model of governance any longer to launch populist movements and to look into trade regulations that look after some nations or one nation or some superpowers? I mean, globalization has gotten a bad rap, and obviously there are going to be interests that will be trampled, but at the end of the day, are hominids at a different stage of their evolution? Do we not need a system of governments that can better guarantee all its citizens some fairness in terms of trade and what falls from it, the chips that fall from it, political stability, etc.? Thank you.
All right, that's a tough question. Liu Yung, you want to take part of that, or?
这个问题我还回答不好。
Okay.
一样的谁往样。
Ling or Yen?
I can say a few words that the world is becoming a multipolar world. So there is a strong demand for the reform of the global governance system. At the IMF, there is an effort to expand the share of emerging market voting shares, and it was successful in the last 5 years. And so China, India, 4 major emerging market economies have risen to the top 10 shareholders of IMF. And there are still initiatives to raise that share further. So that is hope. Another thing is that a lot of, this is a multipolar world, a lot of other multilateral banks have been established. So that's another trend, maybe. I don't know. That answers your question. A lot of new initiatives, including the Shanghai Corporation Banking Association, and also AIIB, and other multilateral banks are being established.
Okay, we have time for one more question. This woman very far in the back. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Ekaterina Sobol. I am with Russian news agency RIA Novosti. And I would like to ask you about your key partner, Russian Federation. As you know, a few days ago, new sanctions were imposed. And the part of this is the company Rusal. So according to Bloomberg, damage was done. It felt London Exchange, New York Exchange. So my question is, do you think that it could intensify ties between Russia and China and maybe to create new financial order in the world? Thank you.
Okay, good question. So is there a new China-Russia financial order in the world?
那个 第一呢，开发银行在俄罗斯呢，设立了一个代表处，而且呢，我们跟俄罗斯呢做了很多的生意。我说的这个开发银行，在“一带一路”上，我们都是按照商业规则。我给大家一再强调，我们所有的贷款都要讲究安全的。所以，因此我们在跟俄罗斯合作当中呢，主要集中在能源领域合作，包括石油，包括亚马尔的天然气。另外呢，我们也跟俄罗斯的外贸银行开展了人民币的合作。所以，因此我们在做跟俄罗斯的合作当中，始终坚持我刚才讲了国际化和商业化的原则来推进这些工作，也包括开发银行在支持中亚天然气的 A、B、D 线等等，都是采取这种方式呢来支持这个事情。所以我们也很关注油价的一个变化，因为这对于我们开发银行资产会有很多的这个要求的。
Yan or Ling, do you want to weigh in on this?
I don't have more information.
Well, actually, I think Yan made an important comment. So I welcome this question. You know, we're always happy to have a frank debate about anything here at Brookings. You know, so there is some speculation that, you know, China and perhaps together with Russia is kind of creating an alternative set of institutions, a new world order. Yen pointed out that the IMF, for example, quota shares are changing, emerging markets are becoming more powerful. China will be the #2 shareholder within a relatively short time. So we have kind of two competing hypotheses. You know, one is that the existing institutions can evolve in a way that countries like China and other major emerging markets, you know, feel that they're represented and that they are served by these institutions. And then the alternative is to start a different set of institutions. I think there's a lot of inertia. So I think there's a pretty high probability that the existing system will persist, but it'll have to evolve over time so that China and other major emerging markets have more share. That's, you know, for me as an American, you know, if we want these institutions to persist, we have to accept that the shareholding is going to change and that the developing world is going to have a greater say. And of course, over time, they won't be the developing world anymore. They'll become rich. And we'll just have a, you know, relatively high-income world. We're going to wrap in a moment. Do you want to add anything? No? Okay. I think we've had a very good session. Let's please give a nice round of applause to our panelists.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.